Hello and welcome to the Strategic Bookkeeper Podcast. First off, forgive my little bit of evening brain. I have been racing around, getting ready to go on a well-deserved holiday. So it's evening before we fly out to the beautiful Maldives. If you've never been to the Maldives, it is as beautiful as it looks. I went last year. We are going back this year, and I really would love to visit every year. Now, on to today's episode. I have just wrapped a conversation with Paul Dunn. Now, Paul Dunn is from B1G1, and I'm going to read out his bio and then just tell you a little bit more. So Paul Dunn is regarded as a legend in the accounting space. Honestly, he's a legend all round. He is the inaugural winner of Accounting Web's Outstanding Contribution to the Profession Award. Wow. He is a senior fellow in one of the world's leading think tanks and a 4-time TEDx speaker. None of this surprises me. Stay tuned because Paul is an amazing human. His programs are used by 310,000 companies around the world. He's featured in Forbes magazine alongside Sir Richard Branson in a global piece on disruptors in business. Paul's 2 books, The Firm of the Future and Time's Up, are best sellers. He is the co-founder of B1G1 Business for Good, the history-making initiative that's already enabled businesses to create over 381 million giving impacts globally. Amazing. So this episode, I'm going to ask you to listen right through, like stay tuned. I met Paul some years ago, and honestly, he is just one of the most amazing world-class people that you're going to get in front of today with this conversation. So listen up to this amazing person and I as we talk about giving, about B1G1 and how you can use it in your business. Okay, so I'm going to explain what I do, what my clients do. We all use giving linked to our success to have a positive impact on the world. And I introduce it to all my entrepreneur clients and they love it because everybody wants to give back. But B1G1 makes it easy, makes it amazing, gives you marketing collateral, just makes it amazing. So we're going to go into more than that in this conversation because I had the pleasure and the privilege of having this conversation for me, for you. So listen up, enjoy the podcast, and I will see you in there. I'm Jeannie Savage, the Strategic Bookkeeper. I've been in practice for 14 years, but more importantly, 5 years in, I achieved a lifestyle practice. This means I scaled my business, could take my hands off the wheel, and draw a nice 6-figure income while being time rich. And that's what I call my dream on my terms. I was recently awarded Women in Finance Innovator of the Year, recognizing my book, my podcast, my program, and my impact globally. The Strategic Bookkeeper is my life's work, and the opportunity to help bookkeepers globally achieve the income and lifestyle that sets them free absolutely fills my cup. Please do connect with me on socials at the Strategic Bookkeepers Way private Facebook group or shoot me an email, hello@thestrategicbookkeeper.global. Welcome to the podcast, Paul.
Great to see you, Jeannie. Such a thrill to be here. Thank you for having me.
Thank you. It is so nice to see you again. Paul and I were just having a really nice catch up and a chat before we pressed record, and it is amazing to see Paul again. I'm really excited. I think back to the beginning of my journey when I met Paul and learned about what we're going to talk about today, and I just didn't know so many things. And now I teach others, right? I talk about the impact of giving, and every entrepreneur I talk to gets excited. My partner was like, wow, this is something I can do. I can make an impact through my business. Yes, you can. Amazing. So, Paul, the first thing I'd love for you to do is just introduce yourself. Tell us a bit about yourself. Anything that is in your heart to share today, we love.
Well, thank you. And thank you for opening it, which is what you do. You're amazing. So, yeah, I think when people say, tell me the story, the issue I have with that is mine is a long story. Being good bookkeepers, you can work it out. I am today 29,987 days on the planet. So there you go. People are now listening to the podcast and they, divided by 365. And they hopefully they've gone, oh my God. So anyways, It's a bit long, but let me get to the key parts of it. And, I think when you look at business stories, they're supposed to involve struggle, right? The whole hero's journey thing that we go through. But when I look at it, I don't see that. I just see how lucky was it to be plucked from where I was born, which is the United Kingdom, in Dover and the White Cliffs and all that kind of stuff, when I was 21, and get to be one of the first 10 in Hewlett-Packard in Australia. I mean, that's like, oh my God, right? And literally sitting down with Bill Hewlett, Dave Packard, the guys who created Silicon Valley way back then. So that's just one example of the luck. And so that also means I'm a bit of a geek as well into those things, which is one of the reasons why I think this time that we are in right now is such an exciting time, right? With, the whole AI thing and so on. And we'll talk about that a little more perhaps later. But to get on with that journey very quickly. So then I created one of Australia's first owned computer companies. And I then realized I got dragged to a seminar. I didn't even know what a seminar was. Looking back in 1981, before most of the people listening to us now were born. And by the way, thank you for listening to this as well. And I got to meet Jim Rohn, the late, great James Rohn. And he said, you've got to journal every day. And I remember the end of that day, because I was running this wonderful computer company, which way back then was doing about 27 million or something in those days. I finished the event, which was at what used to be called the Park Royal in Brisbane. And I called my colleagues and I said, I'm out of here. I'm not doing this anymore. It was in December 81. And they said, you got to be kidding. And I said, I'm not kidding. And they said, well, can you give us a bit of notice? Then in 1990s, because I realized at that point, we all realize this at some point, there's this moment when your body speaks to you, right? And says, I got to do this. And when I saw Rohn, it was like watching like a spiral. And that was kind of me. That was there. So that was when I created a thing called the Results Corporation way back in 1982. On the 1st of April, actually, which is an interesting date, right? And then through 1992, which is when I realized that accountants were kind of interesting. And many people think I'm one of them. I'm not. And I do want to talk actually about that, the relationship between accountants and bookkeepers, because there's something really interesting in that. I spent all those years with accountants up to the year 2000. And then I sold all of my interests in that. I got lucky again and I got to live in Provence, can you believe, for several years. And then I got back into the whole speaking thing again. By the way, in 1998, remember I mentioned that Accountants Bootcamp, that was where I met Mark Wickersham.
Yeah, Mark Wickersham. Yep.
Yeah, that was, the start, if you like, of all the value pricing thing, and the three, all of that stuff. Anyway, let me pick up again from there. And then in 2007, that's when I had this most amazing moment. I think all of us have moments, don't we? Moments that, really hit us, or moments that in some cases change our lives. This was one of those life-changing moments when I met someone that I was mentoring, a young Japanese lady called Masami Sato. And we talk about this actually on the summit as well. She asked me, can you do it differently today? And I said, what do you mean? She said, well, can I ask you the questions? Because normally you're the mentor and you're asking the questions. So I said, well, go. And by the way, there's a message in that. The questions are the key. There is a real message in that. Anyway, so she said, well, here's my question with this beautiful Japanese accent. She said, what if, because that was a lump in my throat there because I'm reliving that moment, right? What if every time business was done, something special happened in the world? And I went, oh, that sounds interesting, right? And in fact, she was running a tiny little food company at the time on the Gold Coast, actually, way back then. And she said, what if we could create a system or a process where businesses could tap into that? And what if it wasn't about doing big things, but what if it was about doing tiny things, tiny things every day that made a real difference? At the end of that conversation, I said, can I be your mentor for the rest of your life? And so that was really life-changing. And that's why now, and for the last 18 years, I've been a part of this incredible movement around the world called B1G1, as you know. And it's B1G1 Business for Good. And so all of the members of B1G1 around the world are all businesses for good. and they're using tiny little actions. So, for example, you didn't know this. I'll tell you right now, just because you and I are on Zoom today, 6 kids are getting access to life-changing education just because you and I are on Zoom. Now, that has nothing to do with Zoom. It's nothing to do with me necessarily, but lots of members do those kind of things. So the idea is that you can link very specific actions to micro impacts from 470 projects around the world. And so that every time you're doing something, great things are happening. So that's what I meant by saying, I got lucky, and I continue to be lucky, because how cool is it in these interesting times that we are in right now to be doing that? And as I said, I think one of the interesting things now, of course, is we've never seen anything like what's happening in AI and stuff. By the way, let me just talk about bookkeepers for a minute. Can I do that?
Yes, love it.
Okay, well, someone I'm sure, called Peter Thorpe, invited me to a bookkeepers conference, right? Way back pre-pandemic. In fact, I saw him about 6 weeks ago when I was speaking in Sydney. Anyway, he was there as well. And he invited me to this bookkeepers conference, and I was like the keynote guy, right? He said to me, this is such a smart thing to say, well, before you speak, I thought it might be interesting if you meet some of the key people in the community. And so I'd arranged like a little thing tonight, and I sat in that room with 7 bookkeepers. And for the first time in my life, I really understood just how powerful, important all of those words. And I say that because I hope there are no accountants listening to this. But for all of those years I was with accountants, guess what happened? What they would say is, accountants are where it's at, right? I don't know.
Yes.
The bookkeeping. That night, I realized how wrong that was. And here's why I realized it. Typically, accountants are not necessarily the best connectors in the world, right? And it was very simple. Typically, they would see your client, if they got to see them at all, they would see them when their annual tax was due, and they'd have a little meeting, and off they go. And they wouldn't even enjoy that, right? It wasn't a enjoyable thing for them to do. It was a pain in the butt, right? On the other hand, you had bookkeepers who were meeting with their clients at least monthly, right? And enjoying that process and being in tune with all the little apps you could get and all of those sorts of things, and making a real difference every single day, rather than waiting for, a year and we'll have a meeting about your tax. And so that for me was one of those life-changing moments about, misinformation that I'd had because of all those years with the other profession. Now, that's probably unfair now, because now, the accounting profession is changing, thank God. The point is still that bookkeepers are really at the core of what's going on. And therefore can have, I think, more significant influence on the human beings than anyone else that I know.
That's what I see. And I'd love to stay on that for a minute, because for everyone listening, and I have, my clients listen to this podcast, and then all the bookkeepers all around the world that are also just reading my books and using my content, listen. In terms of our impact, it is very layered. I mean, bookkeepers tend to be boots in the business, right? We are, the accountants are much more high level. And it's so layered, because the other thing is accounting tends to be quite male dominated, right? Even though you've got a mix of men and women. Bookkeeping is very female dominated. Now, females by nature, the way we come out of the womb, we're nurturers. Right? And I noticed that bookkeepers on the whole, our profession, we're very caring, nurturing, concerned.
Correct.
Yes, right. And so we're boots in the business. And I realized as a bookkeeper in practice years ago, when I was going through the KBI program where I first met you, and I was encouraged to connect deeply with why I was doing what I was doing. And I realized that primarily I worked with dads. So therefore, I was really working with a family business, right? And these business entrepreneurs struggle. And so then I started to realize that when I worked with a dad and I helped him do better in business, and what were the things I helped him with? I helped him make more profit, more cash. I helped him sleep at night. So suddenly his wife was more relaxed. His children were more relaxed. I was like, Yeah, I'm changing the world one business at a time, you know?
But there's an important point there, right? Because frequently people talk about ripple effects. And you're right. When you work with the dad, the ripple effect is actually on the family. In fact, I was talking to somebody on the Gold Coast yesterday, actually, who's a B1G1 member, and they were talking, as you talk very frequently, about the why. And the guy said, can I just tell you, why I do what I do and why I'm so thrilled to be doing what I do? And I said, sure. He said, because together we're creating a business that our kids would be proud to be a part of. And I went, oh my gosh, that is such an awesome definition of legacy. Awesome definition.
It really is, isn't it? I always had a vision that my son, who's really different like his mum, neurodiverse like his mum, well, one day he is someone who's always be able to influence groups of people, right? From 4 years of age, I used to just be like, oh my goodness, this kid's got everyone dancing. Oh, the 4-year-old's got 10 adults doing what he says. And I think if I can channel that energy into, a charitable cause where he can influence people to do good, I thought that for me will be the ultimate legacy evolution of what I do. And I know, Paul, as a woman and coming back to bookkeeping is often female dominated, I really found that when working with dads, and I tend to communicate more like a man, really clear and direct, but my empathy and understanding and connection was always to the woman. So I had a really easy way to relate to the behind the scenes mom. Then, of course, this natural care for the kids. There's so many more layers than I'm a bookkeeper, right? And I have to say the bookkeepers inside my program and that read my book and so on, they go on to really understand this. And it's incredible, the impact. I remember sitting in a room with 2 clients once, young guys, had them with me for about 2 years as clients, restaurant, and I finally got them to benchmark profit. And I was a little teary. And they said, Jeannie, we love you. And when your clients stop and tell you they love you, we love the love. We want the love in the business. You know what I mean? And so for all those bookkeepers with imposter syndrome out there, imposter monster, more skills and confidence, the perfectionism syndrome that comes with being a detail-orientated intellectual, please take a moment, pause the podcast and know that your impact saving the world one business at a time is totally real.
Yeah. So absolutely, totally real. And then one of the things, again, that we'll talk about is that when the family is working together, if you know what I mean, everything is working, right? The business is working and so on. And so the business grows, it's like this wonderful thing. And then that happens and spreads in the community and so on and so forth. So this ripple effect that comes from the power of what you do is so powerful. And yet we frequently forget it. We frequently drop into the whole sort of charging thing, which is, as you know, kind of not exactly the best thing. What should we be doing? Well, Mark talks about it as well. We need to be talking about outcomes. And when you think about outcomes or impact, what is the impact, the value, if you like, of getting a family that works?
Yes.
It's incalculable, right? It really is.
It is the leaders of tomorrow. It is the next president, prime minister. It is someone who changes the entire planet for good, like the ripple.
Exactly. And, I talked about getting lucky before. And by the way, I hope you're still listening wherever you're listening, in your car or wherever it is. And thank you so much for taking that time. I was just looking at my background I have on my Zoom right there. Here we are in B1G1 right now, sitting at a staggering 380 million impacts around the world. I could never have imagined that in 2007. And what's really interesting is when bookkeepers listening to us now start tracking the same thing, when you start tracking the impacts as opposed to tracking the money, something really interesting happens. And we might get to talk about that on the summit. I hope you can tell that I'm excited at the thought of being with you.
Yes, I'm so
and your
excited.
members. I hope you can see that. Yeah.
Yeah. And so, Paul, I know what it means, but I'd love for you to tell the listeners, what does B1G1 mean? So you've got the B1 is the buy one, give one?
Oh, okay. Yes. So everybody that was at B1G1, when Wasami asked me that question, remember about, what if we could do that? She said, in my head, I've already got a name for it. And I said, oh, what have you called it? And she said, it's called buy one, give one. And I said, well, how would that work? I'll tell you exactly the word she said. She said, Well, imagine you want to buy a plasma TV and you go to Harvey Norman. There you go. We should charge them for a thing on the podcast. But anyway, you go to Harvey Norman to buy your plasma TV, or if you're in the US, Best Buy. And I said, Miss Lamy, what did you call this thing? She says, it's called buy one, get one. I said, Miss Lamy, I'm not so sure that's a really good business model for, Harvey Normans or for anyone, because if I go down there to buy a TV, they're not going to buy or not going to give me another TV. And she said, oh, Paul, you misunderstand. And I said, well, help me understand. This is giving me goosebumps, this story. So she said, you get that TV on account of how you want brighter pixels, you want more pixels, you want all of that sort of stuff. And then this was the key moment, actually. She said, so how would it be if when you go to buy that TV, someone who could not see gets the gift of sight? And I went, oh my God, right? And that's when I said, can I be your mentor for the rest of your life, right? And then it took 3 years to figure out how to do that, by the way.
Of course.
3 very interesting years. And we realized that if it was like buy one, give one, it was perhaps like focusing on consumerism, that you had to buy something in order to do it. And we realized that it just should be like, for example, when you want a Zoom call, when you have a great meeting, when, whatever. And so that was when we said, oh, okay, let's call it B1G1. So
B1G1. But, for me as a logical person, and bookkeepers, we're those logical black and white people, we get the transaction. For us, I think we understand there's a transaction and then there's giving. And it's an incredible model and an incredible way to have an impact. And as I said, every time I introduce an entrepreneur to this, they are just so excited. I say, you just need to go away, let it up. And they're excited that there is actually a process, a method, a framework, a way.
Yes, very much so.
Yes, that they can actually give. And so for everyone listening, if you haven't read my first book, no excuses. It's about 6 hours long as an audio book. It's on Spotify. I go into this in my book about giving. Paul, I'd love to know from you. So I'm thinking about the what, the why, the how. How can a bookkeeper use B1G1, use the idea of buy one, give one? I'll give a few examples of what we've done in my practice. So in my bookkeeping practice, if a client decided to choose us, if a client upgraded their services, then it triggered that giving. And we would say, thank you so much. This is what your giving has done. We've been able to do this. And also reviews. It was a really lovely way to say, if you're happy with our service, if you give us the gift of a review, we'll give the gift of.
100%.
So, yeah. And I know that they're a part of B1G1 as well. So a bit about, I guess, the what, the why, the how. How can bookkeepers do this? What is in it for them? I know there's a lot in it for them in terms of personally, professionally, and how do they get cracking?
Okay, we're going to talk about that, of course, a little bit at the summit as well. But basically, you're right. And I think the way that most bookkeepers who are part of B1G1 do it, here's the way I like to talk about it, is you sit down and you think about the customer journey with you. What does that journey look like? What are the moments in that journey that you could express some kind of positive thing for? Yeah. And then once you've figured out those moments, whatever those moments are, and by the way, that's also true in a team member's journey. Like what happens in the team member's journey? What can you do there? And the moment you've done that in B1G1, you've got currently, I think, 469 highly vetted. It takes a long time for a project to become a B1G1 project because we audit them, they don't like it particularly, but we go back over 3 years and then we break it down into very tiny things, right? Very tiny, tiny things. So you don't have to live in this, when I'm successful or sometime, that someday I'll.
Yes.
You can do it literally right now. It's not because in B1G1, there's just a few cents to make great things happen. And even you can do it like there's this woman, she's not a bookkeeper, she lives in Melbourne, her name is Linda. I hope the story is not on the nose, as it were, but it's a real story. So she said, Paul, do you have any idea what teenage kids do in the toilet? I've never been asked that question before. What do you mean? She said, well, as you know, I've got a 17-year-old and a 14-year-old, they're boys. And she said, a couple of things happen when they go to the toilet. And I said, okay, what happened? She said, well, first thing is they take their phone. That's the first thing. The second thing is they seem to take more time in there than, the natural sort of thing would dictate.
They
So
do.
she said, what I've done, this is serious, she's done this. So she's taken a B1G1 graphic, she's posted it up in the, as you're sitting on it, you literally see it, right? And it says, whilst you're sitting here doing whatever else it is you're doing, there are 1 billion people who do not have the privilege of sitting on a toilet. So all we want you to do right now is scan this QR code and do a giving right now. And
I love that.
it's like, oh, and then the kids do it. Then she thought, wow, that's been successful. So she now does it on the fridge. You know, we got the water thing above the fridge that says 730 million people don't have access to clean water. So when you push this button and you scan that, bang, that's what happens.
You've just given me the next idea for birthdays and things. I feel I am a privileged Australian like many others. I don't need any more stuff. It's like, just buy me food. I love food, but
There you go.
And I don't really drink much. And we just got given 2 cabinets of alcohol at a last birthday. And I love the idea. But sometimes giving is tricky. You know, you've got to go here, you've got to go there. And you make it so easy and accessible.
And you can even do it, as you know. And I think Mark's done it because he's what you remember. You can even do it where the customer, the business, or the team member, or the person who just dropped in to say hello and deliver your printing to you, whatever that was. You know, they can choose from whatever it is that you put in front of them. Why don't we do this today? Right? So yeah. And I think it's a very special connection, isn't it? To know that, you know, you talk so eloquently a moment ago when you're talking with the dads, and then you see the impact on their business, and then you see the impact on their family. And that's very powerful, very powerful. And then you can kind of take that beyond that again by just congratulating them for whatever it was, and then letting them know that, you know, something great happened in the world as a result of them doing something, right? So
definitely,
it's really cool.
Yeah. Whenever our clients choose us, that they've chosen to have that impact. So the global goals, can we talk about that as it is with B1G1?
So in 2018, when the global goals came out, we were onto that very quickly. And so now everything in B1G1 it's automatic, it's linked to the appropriate goals. And that's one of the reasons why when you see people's websites, because B1G1 has, as you know, all these widgets that you can actually count up on the website. And one of those is the global goals widget. So it's just counting up what's happening. And now there's even more widgets than you can believe on B1G1 because, well, it's only, 5 years until 2030 when the goals kind of expire. And so we've now got so many other little things there that you can measure. And one of the things, of course, bookkeepers do is measure things very well, right? So we measure and take pride in measuring those impacts very well as well. Yeah. And that continues. I think it was Mother Teresa. I don't want to get into religious stuff at all because that's not me. But see, she once said, the problem we have in the world is that we don't draw our family big enough, which is kind of interesting.
Love that. Yeah, I haven't heard that before. Community is just one of my strongest values, and I just love that. And actually, Paul, I don't often tell this story, but it links so much to that. So when Paul and I were talking about earlier, because Paul was around when the Strategic Bookkeeper was a dream in my heart.
That's right.
And it was a bit like you said, where you have those moments where your body speaks to you. And it was a message from my gut, you know. I went through really hard times as a woman, and I remember one day I looked in the mirror and I looked through the mirror and I swear I could see all the women all around the world going through similar to me. And that gave me comfort. You know, I wasn't alone, but I also decided that I wanted to do something to support every one of those women. And I realized what I needed, and I realized what I could help them achieve to help them in the same situation, which is financial independence and the learning that we should put ourselves rather than our children first, because the only way we show up as our best self, so those we love, is to truly put ourselves first. And I think that drawing the biggest circle, these days my partner says, I'm married to all of my clients. He understands that I take my leadership role very seriously. Yeah, it's beautiful. He never, ever pushes back, never tells me to put my phone down at 11 o'clock at night or anything. My team does, but
that's pretty nice.
Yeah, it is lovely. He understands. I think we've been through a bit for him to understand. But that circle, right, that drawing And that's a really personal thing to share. And it might sound really ethereal. It might sound really like, whoa, what has that got to do with bookkeeping, right? But then what has making a family better got to do with bookkeeping? So drawing that larger circle, wow, that speaks to me like incredibly. So I think 100% of my clients now link their business success to giving. And I would encourage every bookkeeper to do that. From a business point of view, it's another way for you to differentiate yourself, to stand out. So that's a wonderful business case for it. But I know that every entrepreneur wants to give back, and this makes it all simple. For bookkeepers who don't, yes, and bookkeepers, we don't naturally have the marketing, the brand ability, and B1G1 gives it all to you done, which is like all the widgets and everything, which is amazing as well.
You're saying it very well. No wonder I enjoy talking with you.
You need all that.
It's good to see you, right? It's been a while since I've seen you, so it is good to see you.
Yeah, but you need that. Like I said to my partner recently, think about your giving strategy and everything. And he found something he liked, but they actually were not able to make it easy, and they couldn't give him anything, any collateral, and he couldn't. So I said to him, maybe put that on the radar for later and find something that is so much easier now to work with and showcase in your branding and make it easier to give. So that's another part. But I didn't know how well vetted your projects were. So that's been really interesting to me.
Oh, yeah. In fact, once we've got all the data from that 3-year auditing and stuff, the board, which is independent, I can't influence them. I can't say, I've seen this great project. What they do, interestingly, and there's part of me that wishes it wasn't this way, but it is this way. They reject somewhere between 7 and 9 out of 10 every quarter of projects that apply to become B1G1. Now, they don't just say, go away, we don't like you. They say, if you work on this and this and this, then maybe there's a chance that you could be a B1G1 project. So what it means is when you see a B1G1 project, you know it does what it says on the tin, if that makes sense. You really
It does, man. I love that. It does what it says on the tin. I love that. Okay, now, Paul, the best way to get in touch with B1G1 and get started?
Oh, b1g1.com. Very simple.
Easy.
So it is a literal B. I say that because in England, for some strange reason, they refer to it as biggie. It's not. It's the letter B followed by the number 1, followed by a G for giving, we should say, shouldn't we?
Yeah.
And the number 1, and it's .com after that. So it's very, very simple, and you'll see all sorts of really interesting things and get taken on what I hope is a very wonderful journey for you and for the people that you're privileged to serve.
Connect to a cause that speaks to you, speaks to you and your brand story.
And there's another thing, just as we come to saying goodbye to people, for now anyway. So this whole thing around connection, it's been very interesting. I think many of us know that the bookkeeping thing is predominantly female, but to bring that out is really interesting. And I just want to reference another female who you would be familiar with, and that is Brene Brown. I met Brene, she is a hoot. And you may remember what she said. It's so profound, what she said in her first TED Talk, where she was talking about vulnerability. I think 63 million people have already listened to it. And here's what she said. Connection is why we're here. Connection is why we're here. It gives our life purpose and meaning. So what's really interesting, particularly with the guys that might be watching us now, what do guys do? Sometimes they get a little upset with things and they go in their man cave, you know what I mean? And they're not going to come out of there. They switch off totally. Then finally they realize that, no, we need to connect with someone. And it's that connection that is so, so, so important. And then one other thing, just listening to you for a while just gave me this thing. So it's this. All of these things that we've been talking about make such a perfect sense, don't they? The question is, what is it that drives you to do that? And I heard this quote a fair while ago that just came to mind as we were talking. I hope you take note of it and hopefully you act on it as well. When your vision becomes more powerful than your memory, then your future becomes more powerful than your past.
Wow.
And that's what this is all about, bringing people together, giving them a vision of what's possible. and really as well, unlocking the huge potential that we all have.
Yeah, that's definitely what fills my cup.
There you go.
It's amazing, isn't it? And we are here to connect, like Brene Brown says, the great Brene Brown that influences my life every day, every day. My partner's deep in Brene land right now. We are definitely here to connect. Like we're connecting today, and I connect with women and men all over the world, and I get to have a positive impact on their lives, and they connect with me and they have the most incredible positive impact on my life as well. It's all full circle.
Just like you did. Just like you did.
The oneness, right? The oneness. It's about all of us. Amazing. Paul Dunn, such an amazing conversation. I feel really privileged to have had you on the podcast today.
I feel so privileged to be here. Thank you. And thank you, all of you, for listening. Thank you so much for being here as well. Thank you, Jeannie. Super.
Okay, my friend, now it is time to take action. So what are you going to do with what you learned today? The way I see it, you've got two options. You can go it alone to try and save some money, or you can back yourself and go for it and join my tribe. And let me tell you, we are knocking it out of the ballpark. That's not a sales pitch. That is me serving you, dare I say, courageously. To find success, I 100% know you need the mechanics, which is like the keys to the kingdom, but you also need to get your mindset right and be super productive. And these are all things I help you with inside the program. I could go on about this forever because I really want this for you. Have a prosperous week, and I'll see you in the next episode.